Test, 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 test. Oh, do you hear it now? Hello, hello.
I can hear you.
I'm seeing if the stream can hear us.
Hey, there we go.
Sound. Okay, all right.
It's
I have to
alive.
move this speaker away from uh, where we are. So that's usually what happens when we switch on the fly. James's headphones were still set as the audio source, and that's in another state. So here we are, episode 57, mapping your world with DM Andy, and we're going to do that intro again. So go ahead, Andy.
No worries, no worries. Well, Corey, thanks for having me. Again, I'm very honored that you guys would, and I'm very humbled that you guys would ask me to join. As I mentioned before, it's my first debut live stream. I'm a behind the scenes kind of guy, and here we are. I thought I'd show my face to the world and come up from making maps to say hi to everybody.
No problem. So the question we had was, what got you started in doing this?
Yeah, so funny enough, I've kind of always been into maps. It's just been a weird fascination of mine. Ever since I was a kid, I used to love, my parents would gift me atlases, which is probably the strangest thing to give a child. And I just had this book of maps and I'd go through them and I'd love like geography. And then when I started getting into fantasy genres, books and whatnot, I used to just obsess over any kind of fantasy map that I would see. If the book had a map on it, I would just spend a good hour and a half going over the map and just kind of getting lost in what could be in all the different corners of this world. So I've always kind of had this map fascination, and then as far as making maps for tabletop games, I didn't get into it until I started playing D&D, which for me, I'm kind of a newbie in the sense that I've been playing now for I want to say going on 3 years, which sounds like a lot, but compared to how old the game is, it's not really. And so,
Right.
yeah.
So you're one of those D&D players that joined us in the pandemic, right? Is that kind of
Right before, in fact, my group was pretty new. We had maybe a handful of in-person sessions, and then the pandemic started, and I said, well, I need to figure out a solution for that. And we still do play remote now. So,
and then you started with a some kind of virtual tabletop, and then you said, oh, maps need to go into this, and
yeah,
the rest is history, right?
So right around the same time I got into D&D, I discovered Incarnate, which is the map tool that I use to create my maps with. And I got absolutely lost in Incarnate. And it was still, I don't know how old the company is, but I think they were pretty small, at least back when I got started with them, because they didn't have nearly as many resources as they have today, which is, it's an amazing tool. But when I discovered that, all productivity was just lost. I mean, I just, all I could think about was making maps just for map's sake. I didn't know a tool existed that allowed me to create these kind of maps on the fly. And so, my day job suffered because, all I could do is sneak away to make maps on.
So part of the show is just kind of getting that journey, and it's nice to hear that the maps were something that you really enjoyed, even before getting into tabletop roleplay. So we kind of found out that you started about 3 years ago, but tell us about what made it stick for you. What was it that tabletop RPGs made you go, yeah, I want to continue doing this, and I want to devote so much time that my friends and family might think I'm crazy doing this tabletop roleplay game thing?
Well, my family certainly thinks I'm crazy, which is fun. It's always good to be the crazy one in the family, and all my friends are in my current gaming group, and they're all just as crazy as I am, so that worked out really well. Uh, funny enough, when I was a kid, I was always into fantasy. My dad and I used to draw. My dad was an artist, and we would draw from the Boris Vallejo fantasy art books, and he was
Yeah.
a great illustrator and did watercolors, and so I used to try to emulate what he would do, and we would play board games together. Like if you remember the old Heroes Quest
Oh yeah.
board game, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you
Roll the
know,
dice and hope you
yeah,
don't get skulls.
that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's right. Battle Masters and then all that stuff. And it was funny because I always kind of grew up in that environment, but for some reason there was such that negative stigma about Dungeons and Dragons. I was
Yeah.
born in 82, right? So that satanic panic that some folks have heard about is a real thing. And it didn't matter what the game was. I mean, I'm drawing Boris Vallejo, and if you're familiar with his work, he has some pretty racy illustrations for a 10-year-old to be drawing, and that was fine. But if I said the word Dungeons and Dragons, it was a big no in our
Yeah.
household, growing up. So I never got to actually play D&D when I was a kid, but um, my journey kind of started there. And then I just got really heavily into video games for probably about 3/4 of my life.
Hmm.
And funny enough, D&D was probably the one thing that really just broke me out of video gaming. And it wasn't that I didn't like gaming anymore. I still do, and I miss it because I don't have time to play games
Right.
these days. Um, but I think that what to your question of what made it stick, I when I discovered that I could mod Skyrim,
Right.
for those gamers who mod Skyrim, and I discovered that it was like the world just stopped, and I started to put in all sorts of mods. I can add this, I can make this thing that annoyed me better, I could fix that, and it was such an incredible tool because it felt like I could make the game my own.
Right.
And it felt like I can play this game that I love the way that I want to do it, which I'm very sadistic. I like the super hardcore, really difficult, challenging. I need to eat and sleep and do all this stuff in game. I really like that style, and I think for me, D&D is an extension of that. It is a no limit. I can mod my D&D world and really make it my own creation without any limits. And that just was amazing and incredible to me. So it's been nothing but D&D the last 3 years.
So, you say you like really hard mode video games. Do you think your D&D play is that way as well? Are you more a crunchy rules player, or are you more a role player and storyteller,
I'm
or
very
somewhere in between?
much. It's funny. I haven't really put much thought into that, although I am very much a role player. I'm very big into storytelling. I think the cooperative narrative is the thing that drives my love for the game the most.
Yeah.
I put a lot of thought into NPCs. I overthink all of my sessions when I run them. Um, you see all the D&D tips online, and every single one of them tells you not to over prep, and I know that, and I do it anyway.
Hey, yeah, James and I have had this argument before, and James is on the opposite side. Yeah, exactly. James is in chat. He says, "This is you, over prepper,"
Yeah.
which is it's true. Like I prepare so much for my players. Even when I'm writing plots of Darkenhaven,
Hmm.
there are things that I'm saying. For example, last week's monster had a different like the special ability that the monster had. When somebody targeted it, it was kind of like sanctuary but kind of different. So
Hmm.
when somebody targeted it, they had to make a will save or have to target something else. um, but instead of it just leaving like that, hey, this corruption is making you not want to attack this thing, I actually wrote for each character a backstory thing that they had a vision of when they targeted that monster.
That's amazing.
So
Yeah.
so that's me, and I think it adds a lot to the games. um but sometimes it never happens. And you've sat at the table with your friends for
Hmm.
4 hours, and you're like, oh man, 2/3 of this never happened, and we've got
I
to move forward.
100%. I'm gonna try to say this spoiler free for the Curse of Strahd players that might be in the chat, but I just recently had our group in the swamps of Berez, and it's swampy marshland, and it's ruled over by an evil hag, and it's a lot of fun. And naturally, I added just a ton of additional, not just random encounters. I actually found that I use random encounters, but 99% of the time I'll just pick what's most appropriate, I think,
Mhm.
for where they might be, because or what fits the narrative better. And I think it's that that control that I'm always trying to exercise. But I had all of this really fun stuff planned, and they had to get this dragon skull and cart it all the way back, and I wrote rules about transporting this massive skull, and there was a whole arc with evil druids and all this stuff, and they were sitting there talking about how to get the skull back to this castle. And my druid player, she's our newest player, brand new to D&D. This is her first time ever, not first session, but this is her first game ever. And she's going through her spells, and she says, hey, do you remember that tree that I touched on my first session ever back at the castle that we're supposed to go in the graveyard? And I said, yeah, you were climbing all over that thing. She's like, yeah, so I'm going to cast, I can't remember specifically the spell's name, but it gets transport via plant, or it allows you to link two plants together and just transport or teleport from one plant to another on the same plane. She said, yeah, so I'm going to touch this tree over here, and we're just going to teleport the skull back to where we need it. It felt like I just, okay, here's my whole binder, and that goes in the trash. But I loved it. I joke and we laugh about it, but in my heart, I was so happy because I love when my players keep me on my toes when they do wild
Mhm.
stuff like that I didn't think about. And it's okay. I'll still use that stuff later. They just don't know it yet. And they
Right,
might if they're
right.
listening.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is it is collaborative storytelling, and when you create something that, I mean, you can always move it. It doesn't have to be in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
swamps. You just tweak it a little bit and make it something else. Um, and I'm of the opinion that you definitely have to have some rails
Hmm.
when you're telling a good story. If it's all just reactionary player stuff, there's no through line, and sometimes the group just like falls apart as far as the storyline. But it doesn't mean that you can't take those things you created and move them somewhere else.
Hmm. Yeah.
Or for me, it's like, okay, I know these 5 bullet points have to happen before the next chapter of my campaign starts. This is
Yeah.
these, and and if I move those around, that's fine. If the players decide that they want to do something else, we can come back to those 5. But I kind of have those things, Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
a big part of it, right, is you definitely don't want to railroad, and we hear that argument back and forth. And I when I hear railroad, I really interpret that as strip player agency, right, and forcing your
Yes.
players to do a thing when they may not necessarily want to do that. So, but I think that having your, like you said, having that kind of almost narrative storytelling structure is important, because I've
Mhm.
played as a player in games where it's just been, okay, you guys got out of the intro cave level. Where do you want to do? And it's like, well, we don't know the world. We don't have any
Right.
purpose or reasons outside of our own backstories, all of which are wildly different.
Right.
And none of us know each other, and it becomes this kind of awkward, like, I guess we'll go to town and see if anything's interesting there, and that's
Right.
fine. And there's nothing against those types of games for sure. But I've always been more of, I like the 4 act structure. I like these kind of big narrative plot points to unfold, and how they unfold and how the players get there or how the story ends is all up in the air.
Yeah, and I like what you said about, what you want to do is make sure that players have agency. And a good example of that is the module that I just kickstarted, which is a historical fiction RPG module. So the history happens. We don't
Hmm.
change history. It's not an alternate history module. It's set in feudal Japan, and it's a you're these things happen.
Hmm.
But writing in the way that players parallel the characters, parallel that historical story, and have tons of agency about what they do, I think is what makes it fun.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and those who have play tested it could have said the same thing. It's like I didn't feel like I was on, like it was, you know, a railroady type adventure. And I think that you can do that, especially like what you're talking about with Barovia. Um, it's a module. It's
Hmm.
got all these things that are written in, but by allowing yourself to create some extra stuff, including some maps, which we're going to show off some maps here in a few minutes. Um, uh, Including the maps and including, like you said before, and I don't know if this was actually in the part that was no sound, but when you're looking at the map and you're like, ooh, what's over here and what's
Hmm.
that and what's this over here, and
Yeah.
allowing the players to see that map that you created or see the map that you have available if it's a printed module with a map, and saying, uh, well, there's this little hut in the middle of the woods and it doesn't have a name or anything. What's that? Well,
Yeah.
let's go find out, and that's kind of cool.
Exactly. It's that, or what I like to do, like the map that I have for my background, this map, the map of Barovia that I recreated. I have a version without names, and I've created this kind of parchment look to it because I like to give it to my players in game, if they buy it from a map shop or things like that. But the environment is ever changing, so there'll be, for example, it won't just say the swamps of Berez, they'll say Old Berez, or there might just be like a crumbly ruin, and they ask about it to a shopkeep or to someone at the tavern, and they get a fun like ghost story or some
Right.
rumors, but they might get wildly different rumors about the same place, and that
Yeah.
piques interest. And to me, it's fun because it allows me to take that thing that I loved as a kid, that map in the fantasy book, and the first page, that Game of Thrones first page, what map of Westeros, right? Like I get to take that, and I get to, when I had that fun thought of what's in this corner, what is in this
Mhm.
unmapped area, I get to bring that to life, and I don't know that there's really anything else that could replace that level of creativity that tabletop RPGs give us DMs as
Right.
such a fantastical creative outlet.
So speaking of maps, I'm gonna jump down here on my other machine that's running the stream and bring up some maps, and we'll let you talk about each one a little bit.
Sure, sure.
All right. As we switch scenes, I think I it did not carry my audio over. So now we're looking at maps. Sorry. Uh, go ahead with that again. You were
Oh
talking
yeah.
about getting started and other Patreon folks, and we'll let you.
Yeah, no worries at
You got
all.
a practice run on talking
Yeah,
about maps.
that's great. No, I was saying that, when I first started in Roll20 with my group, when we moved over due to the pandemic, I subbed to about probably a dozen different Patreon map makers. I have now just a ton more that I sub to because I'm a big supporter, a big believer in supporting and uplifting the map making community. And I might see a map that someone's made, a very talented artist, and I might draw inspiration from that map, and be like, oh, I don't know what I'd use this for, but it's amazing, and it helps kind of with that creative flow. It's like a
Right.
launching off point. Sometimes you just see a visual and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do here, but I'm going to do something. But what drove me nuts, and this is kind of my OCD personality, is as much as I loved the various map makers that I would support, I had a myriad of different art styles throughout my game. Some would be a bit more cartoony, others would
Right.
be too bright, and they were beautiful maps, but they were wildly different from the ones that come in the module, from the ones that I bought off Patreon. To just whatever. And so I just, that inconsistency really started to bother me. So, I said, okay, well, let me play around with Incarnate more. I've been fiddling around with it for the better part of a year. I've got decent, not great, but decent. And I'll just, let me just start making maps as I need them for my players.
Right.
And then from there, I kind of thought, well, I'm not very active on Reddit, but I joined this Curse Estrad sub Reddit to help with DMing the module. And I see that other people have posted maps, so I don't know, maybe they might be interested in this forest map that I made or this road map. I was just I just shrugged and go, it's scary to put your work out there for the internet to see, because of course you don't want to get torn down, and you don't want to see the mean comments. But fortunately, D&D community as a whole has been incredibly supportive.
Absolutely, especially the Dungeon Master community, who
Oh
are
yeah.
so thankful for any tips, tricks, maps, things that you share, because we're all creators and we're all trying to tell
Yeah.
great stories.
Yeah. Oh, it's I'm blown away. I've been I've been a nerd my whole life, and I've been in many different nerd cultures and communities, and I say D&D, especially the DM community, by far is just I'm blown away by the support, the kindness, the willingness to help each other has been incredible. So, I posted on Reddit, and people liked them. They liked my work, and I was kind of blown away by it. And it kind of it was a little inspiring, like, wow, okay, well, I don't see other maps for, this area. I don't see a map for the eastern gate of Barovia. I don't see a map for the streets of Barovia, all these different areas. And I said, well, why don't I need them anyway? Why don't I just start making them for the community? So I kind of started with unmapped areas, and and then I probably posted on the Curse Strahd sub for about, I think, 6 months, and people kept asking me, what's your Patreon, and how can we support you? And I'm just, I don't know that I'm that good. I'm not ready. And my wife who's absolutely amazing. She's my partner in crime, and she helps me with the social media because I'm hopeless when it comes to, the Instagram and the Facebooks and all that.
Yeah, and all the other
Yeah, yeah,
social web and website media
yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a whiz at that. But she, really encouraged me, and she's like, just do it. People like your work. Just launch your page. Who knows? Um, and I did, and it's been. I'm just blown away. I'm blown away by the community, by the support that I've received on this journey, and it's super inspirational. And so, you asked me earlier what made it stick. Well, a big part of that, right, is seeing this community that I can make maps for, and some of the comments that I see about how DMs use my work, and and how it's enhanced their game, and how their players love seeing these different environments that I create is euphoric, to say the least, when I see
Right.
that. And it's just like, wow, I can help. I can help make someone else's game better with a visual map. Like, that's incredible. And so that's what led me to this point, and to the map you're showing on the screen right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because people are asking in chat how you do the spiral staircases and whatnot. So let's talk about this map for a second, and
Sure.
then we'll
Yeah.
move to another one.
Yeah. So this one is one of my more recent maps. Uh, this is Argynvostholt from the Curse of Strahd module, one of my absolute favorite locations, and I wanted to spend a lot of time on this particular map just because I love the story of the knights. The broken knights of the Silver Dragon. I just love that whole arc. And I probably spent there's 4 maps total, because it's 3 stories plus the roof. So there's different layers to this map, but it probably took me over 100 hours, I think, in total, if not more. So, but to answer some of the questions about the stairs, I do get asked about my stairs a lot, and I wish I had a really easy answer. But really, the answer is that I place them one at a time. Uh, every single asset you see here is hand placed one at a time, painstakingly, adjusted and moved to where I want it. But for stairs, I don't, and it's no dig on the incarnate assets or anything. I just don't like the preset stair assets, because I feel like they don't give me that depth that I want when you do a top down map. So I get the stairs, I place them one at a time. I go through and I adjust the brightness of the lower step, and I make that the darker. And then I just each step I click and adjust, a scale up brightness by increments of 5. And then I go through and I make sure the shadows casted to give that illusion of depth, and it's a very painstaking process. But
Wow.
the end results are worth it.
Building Castle Barovia in one stair at a time. That's
pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's not Castle Barovia. It's Castle
Argynvostholt is this
yeah.
one. Yeah. But Castle Barovia or Castle Ravenloft is next. It's actually my next big map project. My latest release was the road to Castle Ravenloft, which was a windy, mountain road that led all the way up to the drawbridge and the twin gatehouse towers. So my next one will be the castle proper.
So I'm just gonna kind of go through and just stop me as we're looking at maps, and I'll just let you watch the screen. Remember, we're on about a 5-second delay, so
sure.
You watch the screen and comment on. This is the first floor, apparently, that I've just brought up.
Oh yeah, that's right. And in fact, if you can zoom in, I don't know if you can zoom in on a spot, but that dragon statue that's on the outside, all the way to the left of the map, right in front of the stairs. Pan over to the left. Yeah, there you go. So that dragon statue probably took me alone, I think, maybe 4 to 5 hours to make. It's a total of 318 different assets.
Holy
and funny enough, it was probably a week before Incarnate released their dragon statue asset from the Hell Stamps that they just launched. So I ended up having to make this because there wasn't a good dragon statue. And for me, seeing that dragon is the first thing that players see at Argynvostholt.
Absolutely. First thing I noticed, that in the graveyard up to the northeast.
Yeah. The trees, if you see the trees, the kind of red and yellow trees that are on the outside, it's another one of my insane quirks that I do on my maps. I probably do too much, but those trees ended up hand coloring each individual leaf. And I know that sounds insane, but it is. I just the fall trees, and there's nothing wrong with the fall trees. I like them, but I like a nice leafy tree with different kind of fall tones. And I thought that the fall color scheme worked really well with the mood that I was trying to capture on this map. So I ended up taking some of the, I think it was the herb asset, and then stripping the color and then just recoloring each leaf and then making the trees that way. Yeah. So.
All right, so we're switching a little bit. We're going to go to the road to Argenvost.
Yeah, so I made so as I mentioned before, I like to make maps for areas that aren't specified in the module. So I do two kind of maps. I'll remake the maps that are already in the book. And again, I think the Wizards cartographers are really talented. I have nothing but the utmost respect for their work. I love their consistency. And I think that the Curse of Strahd maps by default are probably one of the better sets of maps that we've seen in the pre-written modules. However, from a mood or a tone perspective, I always kind of found them a bit bright and cheery for Barovia. You know,
right.
the dread land of mists ruled by vampiric lord Strahd von Zarovich. And you know, you have these bright kind of cheery maps. So I like to darken them up a bit, kind of grime them up. So, but the other thing that I do, so I'll remake the maps that are in the book, but I also like to make maps for areas that don't have maps, because as a DM, I think to myself, well, there's a cool windy road that leads to this castle. Something is lurking here. I don't know what yet, but I'm going to do an encounter of some sort. All right. So this map was a fun one. So as part of my journey in map making, I've made some really wonderful and amazing friends. A lot of different cartographers that I've befriended along the way. Vincent from I'm probably going to say his cartography name wrong, but I think it's Abar Cartography. Him and I have worked together since I started. He also has a Patreon page and does amazing Curse of Strahd maps as well. I think he uses Dungeon Draft, if I'm not mistaken. And him and I have just, became fast friends. And, I've made other map making friends along the way. Well, I've also, partnered up with a few content creators. Pyram King is one of them, who writes incredible work for Curse of Strahd, supplemental adventures. And the other one is Lunch Break Heroes, if you're familiar with the LBH channel. So this map, I was approached by Steve at Lunch Break Heroes to create maps for their original adventures that they were putting together. That he's got on his website. And so this one is is an inn for one of his original adventures about a haunted lantern that haunts this particular inn. And it's a really intriguing, almost like a murder mystery type story. So this is the inn for that map, and I think it's a 4-story inn for this one. I think this is the 3rd or 4th floor. And you'll see on the floor as well, you can see that, I'll go in and I'll recolor each individual wood panel, just so I can get that slapdash look.
All right, so we've kind of went through the inn, and now we're looking at cityscapes.
Yeah, this was my first commission project. And if I'm being honest, I was approached by actually one of my patrons who said, "Do you do commissions?" I have never done a commission before. I have no idea how to do commissions. And I said, "Sure, why not?" And he wanted to do, this was actually an old domain of dread, kind of the greater Ravenloft lore, the city of Odair, ruled by oh boy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. It's the puppet Dark Lord. Basically, it's a whole Pinocchio vibe in this town. And he sent me the map, and I think this map was probably from one of the earliest editions. It's got to be from the 80s, because I think Curse of Strahd is as old as I am. I think Curse of Strahd came out, or Ravenloft, I should say, was 82 or 83. something like that. So it's got to be up there. So he sent me this very rough sketch of a map of the city of O'Dare and said, "Could you make this city?" The picture that he sent me was really just, I mean, they were just rectangles and triangles drawn on a page. And so he said, "Here's a list of buildings. Can you make this city come to life?" And here we are.
And the great thing is just the detail on some of these outsides of the buildings.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. He gave me a list. Every building had a purpose, and I thought the list was pretty extensive. And so it was kind of fun to go, okay, this green building, for example, that's on the screen is it was the doctor slash apothecary. So I had you got the bodies, the old clothing meant for burning. You got the plague doctor masks, and of course a holy book. Each building, the one above it has the tailor. So I have bolts of cloth. I tried to show, without being able to show the interior, I tried to show what the shop or the building function is with just some,
Right.
decor and little details. I'm also pretty crazy when it comes to doing roofs. I, I don't typically. I think I did a few times in this case. I don't typically use the prefabricated buildings that Incarnate comes with, just because I like to make my own. But one thing, and especially like medieval themed city maps or even Curse of Strahd, I've never liked a clean roof. I know it sounds really weird, but I've seen maps, in these kind of grimy cities with the roof is always perfectly clean. So I'll spend a lot of time, griming up the roofs, if that makes sense.
So tell me more before we get into this next map. Tell me more about kind of that process, because I know that the assets that are in um, Incarnate. Yeah, so you create a lot of your own assets. Do you use Photoshop, GIMP? What do you do to create your own assets?
So I when I say create my own assets, I'm not actually creating them from scratch. I'm combining pre-existing assets to create them. So everything that you see on my maps is all done with Incarnate, almost 100%. I've had a few artist friends of mine draw me some custom assets that I needed in a pinch. Um, Most of it's hand drawn. I've used Photoshop to enhance colors. Recently, I've been using Photoshop to do rain, uh,
Okay.
only because the rain filter in Incarnate is great. It's a one-click rain solution, but it gets really tricky, like the map that you see on the screen, when you want to add rain to the exterior, but not to the interior.
Right. It's not
So
raining inside here. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a way to do it in Incarnate, which is it's tricky and very time consuming. There is a way to do rain on the outside and not on the inside, and I'm happy to go through that process if you want. But I've taken to just using Photoshop, and I bought some pre-existing rain assets, and now I can just kind of add them. What I'll do is in Incarnate, I'll gray up the map to kind of add the sense of overcast sky.
Right.
And then I'll go in Photoshop and add rain to exactly where I want it to be. So, I use outside programs like Photoshop to do some extra work, but 99% of the stuff you see on my maps is all done within Incarnate.
Wow. Wow.
All right, so I'll go to the next one here, and then this is the second floor of that same inn.
Yeah, this was actually another commission project that was a lot of fun. I wrote, and my hat is 100% off to all of the content writers, all of you DMs and content creators who have written adventures. Dear God, that is a lot of work. And I was like, I'm going to do my own adventure. That'll be fun because it'll go with my maps. And I created my Curse of Strahd group was my guinea pig. And I kind of threw out this whole, I wanted to add a brothel in one of the bigger towns with this kind of whole story arc behind it. And I created that adventure. I formatted it. I sourced the art and licensed the art so I can distribute it. I think I used Home Brewery to write the adventure and proofreading and going through the adventure flow to make sure it wasn't too wordy. And it was a ton of work. And I know that people are probably thinking that about my maps, but yeah, my hat is off to all adventure writers. So the reason I launch into that spiel is this was part of that. It's the Blue Water Inn from Valaki in Curse but it has been taken over by one of the NPCs there that I kind of flushed out of my homebrew adventure. So he ousts the current owners in kind of a business takeover. He turns it from the Blue Water Inn to the Sanguine Inn. And then he expands his business empire within that city. So that's why there's a lot of red tones, a lot of roses.
All right, let's go. So this is one of the Strahd ones, chapter 5.
Yeah, this is a phenomenal supplement. It's written by the Assiduous Adventurer, if I'm saying that correctly. It's on the DM's Guild. It's called the Interactive Tome of Strahd, and it's a DM's Guild Platinum seller. And what Assiduous did was he took an item that's kind of meh in the module. If you're familiar with the Tome of Strahd, you get it. It's about 1 page of backstory, and that's kind of it. And it's one of the big artifacts of the game. So he's taken that, and he has, I think I want to say there's 10 or 11 chapters in the book, and the players can spend 4 hours deciphering the text, reading a chapter, and as they read the chapter, they all get pulled into that chapter's memories. And so what's really neat about that is it goes into the greater history and lore of Barovia, and it's that classic show, don't tell.
Right.
And your players get to relive all of Strahd's past from even pre-vampire days, and learn about him in these small little chunks as they go through the adventure. So this,
that's a good add to
it's hugely popular, and I got asked by a lot of the community members, do maps for interactive Tome of Strahd, and so this one is the Amber Temple, kind of pre-corruption.
And that's, I always say this about what makes a good adventure, and this goes for movies as well as role play games, is having a good villain, having a villain that you get to know, and you get to learn some empathy about, and I think about the Marvel movies. Thanos is a good villain because you get to know Thanos. You get to know why he does what he does. He's not just like, me, I'm going to poison the well, right?
The little curly mustache. Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I 100% agree with you. I will probably never run a villain in any of my D&D games because they are evil and they want to do evil things. Villains by and large, and that's fine. You could just have a thing that's innately evil, and okay, but most villains by and large don't know that they're doing bad things. What they believe is a warped reality of their truth.
Right.
And what they believe is maybe they are doing good, or they're justified by some warped way of getting there mentally. And I think that's what makes Strahd such a complex villain.
I'm gonna switch us back to our other scene here, so that
Okay.
faces are up, because I want to talk about this this villain thing a little bit more. As soon as I find the right scene. There we are. We're back, I think.
All right.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about this, because if you sound like you do your villains like I do my villains, and what I've found, and it makes me nerd out a little bit, is players have a hard time defeating them. Not because they're difficult to defeat or their stats are bad, but because they're like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. for example, in last episode that James actually ran of Plots in Darkenhaven, there's a bad guy, and he's definitely a bad guy, called Bloodsmite, and he has this. When he was in lockdown, which is the part of Darkenhaven City that you get this cursed tattoo, and if you leave lockdown or the prison part of the city, the curse activates and bad things happen to you.
Yeah, I love that.
So he was there, and then he got pardoned by one of the magistrates who was corrupt, and then basically used as a thug for this magistrate. But while he was there, he was like running a gang who basically hunted blood touch within lockdown. And the blood touch people are these people who have like Fey ancestry or dragon ancestry or whatever, right? So he was a racist. We'll just put it that way. Well, and then in the last episode, he's thinking he's doing something great because now the magistrate wants to sell off some blood touched people to this other land who, and we won't get into that backstory, but he's thinking he's doing a service to the city. He's thinking the magistrate has empowered me to take these people that don't belong here and move them out. And I noticed when I was watching the episode that because he was played in this, I got the law on my side, I'm doing the right thing. They were like, okay, well, we're not going to just take out this villain. We're going to talk to him. Right. So do you find that in your games that you end up not having an encounter because of the way that the villain has become real to the players?
Not yet. My players all pretty much hate Strahd. And it's funny because it's hard not to hate him because at his core he's a narcissistic gaslighter who abuses women, and it's just it's hard not to flip that. It's hard not to have a redemption arc for Strahd, right? So that was kind of a full-blown conclusion there, but that's always kind of been, I think Strahd has some pretty black and white enemies. However, I would say that one of the ones that I like the most is probably the abbot, who is I don't want to say too much in the way of spoilers in case we have any players in the chat, but the abbot is one of those I guess you could call him a villain, but very misguided, and 9 times out of 10 players have no idea what to do with him. My group did, but it took them a while to get there. On their first meeting with him, they were just like, this guy's kind of weird, but we need to suss him out a bit more. I think for me, when I grew up as well, less these days, but I was really big in the comic books, and the Watchmen for me was one of my favorite comic books, graphic novels, and Ozymandias is for me a perfect villain, because he killed a lot of people to save a lot more people, and you have Rorschach, who's like, this is wrong, I have to stop this, there is no in between, he did something wrong and he must be stopped, and it becomes this whole thing of what he did to save humanity, but at a huge loss. And to me it's like, that's a good villain.
Exactly. So I'm going to throw it out to chat here in the last few minutes, to see if there are questions about map making, about your DM style, just anything they want to ask. And while we're seeing if those chats come in, I just want to say, man, your maps are amazing.
Thank you.
With the detail, the time you take to make them, all of that stuff is just amazing to me. So and the fact that you're taking things for an area that people, and I know that you said the wizards cartographers you have respect for. I come from, wow, when I look at some of the 5e modules that they're putting out now, and I see the maps that they come with, Dragon Heist, for example, I go, what did we step back into the 90s? What happened to these
Yeah.
maps?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that there are people out there like you making really nice looking maps for this content.
Yeah, I'm actually almost done with Curse of Strahd. I'm going to go over and redo some of my older work, but I do plan on. I mean, I know it's lofty, but I do plan on hitting every curse or every wizard's module. Just because as a DM, sometimes my first module I ever ran, like probably many DMs, was Lost Mines of Phandelver, and I'm flipping through the book, going, okay, I need a map for the Orcs of Wyvern tour. Where's the map? No map. Okay, right. So so I have to go and sort. So it's stuff like that. That I want to do. So I'd love to do Icewind Dale and Tomb of Annihilation and all these. The new some of the new Radiant Citadel. I was reading about the night market, and I'm like, yes, I need a map for that.
All right, so questions from chat.
Yes.
The first one's from James, and I'll wait until after we're off stream to ask that one because I don't want to put you on the spot. What are the file sizes on big maps from Shadowlander?
Okay, so file sizes, it depends, and it could vary. I post resolutions in 4K and 8K. So 4K maps, I try to keep under 10 megs because that's Roll20's upper limit. And then my 8K maps can be insane. They could be up to 25 to 30 megs. But what I'll do, especially for my Foundry crowd, is I resize all of my maps into WebP files, and I'll change the pixel count, because when I export them, they have odd pixels, and it makes your pixel per inch a fraction, and it gets really messy. And Foundry doesn't allow you to do 55.5 pixels per square.
Right.
So if it's a 4K map square, I'll do 4,000 by 4,000 pixels. That way it's a nice even 100 if it's a 40 by 40 grid. And the WebP files use lossy. What's the? I'm drawing a blank here, but I'm able to shrink down significantly those file sizes. So an 8K file that might have been 24 megs now turns into a 8 meg WebP file that loads into Roll20 and Foundry really well. So I hope.
And still looks really good. It doesn't. It's not like you're looking at grainy.
Right. In fact, I personally, for my own games, I use my 8K WebP files into Roll20, and it keeps the quality while being able to handle a file that I can actually upload in Roll20. So hopefully that answered that question.
And your players aren't sitting there waiting forever for the map to load.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Any other questions? Let me roll up in the chat. So are you done with Strahd?
I have one last location. I get this question the most, is when am I going to do Castle Ravenloft? And it's my last core location to do. I've mapped out every single corner other than just some really niche stuff and third-party content. But the main areas, I've mapped them all out with the exception of the castles. So that's next. In fact, I hope to actually have the exterior castle done by September, and then I'll be doing the interior maps over the next few months. Once Castle Ravenloft is done, then I plan on going back and hitting third-party content creators who have added locations. Some popular locations are Mandy Mod. She's a content creator for Curse of Strahd, and she's added a very popular orphanage in Vallaki, another location called the Reformation Center. Yeah, you have Dragnacarta, Pyram King, and Lunch Break Heroes. These guys have all added locations. So I want to have maps for everything that's out there. And then also I want to redo, I've been doing these Curse of Strahd maps for a year and a half now. And my skills, I don't mean to humble brag here, but I'm better now than I was a year and a half ago.
Right.
And so when I look at my older maps, I'm just like, I could do better now. So I'm going to go through and redo some of my older maps to my standard of mapping now.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you do you build the maps to a token, or are they not sized from that? I don't understand James's
Yep.
question. Maybe you
No,
do.
I think I get it. 100%. I build for the token in mind. You know what is a huge advantage of being a DM and a cartographer is I know what DMs are looking for. So when you go to put that building map on a grid, it's really annoying when you have like a fraction of a square to place a token
Right.
in,
Okay.
and it doesn't really work. And so what I'll do, it's probably one of the and I won't launch into a huge tirade here, but it's one of the things I struggle with the most when I do city maps, because from a functionality point of view, I like to snap my buildings to a grid, make them a nice, perfect rectangular square that looks nice, and the grid is perfect and you can fit tokens in it. From a visual standpoint, you end up having these very blocky looking cities.
Right.
Diagonal buildings look great on a city map aesthetically, and they're a nightmare for tokens. So I wrestle with that. I try to find a good balance. But yes, I do very much. I try to place my walls right in the center of that grid line. So when you're drawing your dynamic lights, I try to be cognizant of dynamic lighting. I try to be cognizant and place the door right on the grid and not in between, so players can stand there and click on the door to open it if you're in Foundry, and all that stuff. So
Yeah. So I guess we'll do last call here. Any last questions? Thanks for the shout out, Shadow Lantern. Can't wait to see you back here. And one last comment on the buildings on the city maps, which is I always assume that when we're on the streets in a city, that these buildings have overhangs. So I always just say, okay, if you crowd up against a building, you're still in the street. It's just you're underneath some overhang of that building, that you're not like half in, half out of the building or something like that. So, but yeah, I really appreciate the when you're inside, not having a room that is 2.5 squares by 2.5 squares, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I know what what kind of functionality I'm looking for as a fellow DM, and I can apply that to my map creations. So I try to be I try to create DM friendly maps as well as aesthetically pleasing maps.
So this is DM Andy, which is DM_Andy, right?
Yes.
On Patreon. So make sure you give that a follow and see all of these great maps. Is there anything you want to say about your Patreon as kind of a closing to help people understand how that works for them?
I'm 100% humbled by all the Patreon supporters that I have. The community that we've built has been incredible. On what I try to do for anything, obviously that's under the fan content creation policy. So my Castle Ravenloft and any of the core IP stuff I do for Wizards, I will always post that publicly on like Reddit, or my wife will post them on Instagram. So you'll still be able to get those. I'll also do public posts on my Patreon page, so you don't even need to sign up to get that stuff. What I'll do for my paid, I only have one paid rank or tier, is I'll do all the additional things outside of the core map. So weather variants, I do day and night, rain. I create clean versions. I have a lot of Foundry users. I like to add things like fog into my maps, but a lot of my Foundry crowd, they'll add their own animated fog, or they'll add their own night. So I do a version without fog, without lights, to help DMs who like to add that stuff.
Right.
In addition to creating, like 8K, I do the 8K exports. I do the WebP resizing. I try to keep it as user friendly as possible for my paid tier. And I'm hoping, I'm still learning Foundry, but my eventual goal is to also include baked in lights, if I could actually learn how to do the lighting in Foundry and then do the module export, where other users can just import the map pack into Foundry with the lighting. That'll help make things easier. So that's kind of on my to-do list.
Well, we use Foundry for plots in Darkenhaven and the affordables on stream. Um, and James just said he's happy to help with that. But you
Oh,
know, that's
appreciate that. Yeah.
so yeah.
And I just started watching your guys' game as well. It's I watched the first episode. It was awesome.
Thank you, and that's that. If you watch the first episode, I was still jumbling around in Foundry because like you, I used Roll20 for so long, and then coming on to this team, they use Foundry VTT, so I had to learn it. And and the bad thing for those who got stuck with the pre-recorded episode. So episode 5 was pre-recorded, and I did not know Foundry at all. So the episode before last is actually a pre-recorded, which was the first one we actually played. And yeah, exactly.
I'm in a
exactly. Thanks, James. Episode 3, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm in a Curse of Strahd group as a player, and the DM there uses Foundry for the first time as well. So we're all just kind of learning it as we play. And he's like, I don't know how to do this. Like, we'll figure it out. Let's do it live.
Yeah, we did about, I'd say about 10 minutes of role play while the players were looking at the wrong map because I didn't know how to activate the correct map. I thought if I just went to the next tab and started, for the watchers, they're watching my screen. So everybody watching the stream saw what they were supposed to, but the players were like, can't see anything.
I've been playing on Roll20 now for years, and I still do that. I'm going. My players are so nice. They're so polite. Eventually one of them will say, like, should we be looking at a map? And I'm like, I'm looking at the map, but you're not. I forgot to switch the DM screen
flag.
Over. yeah, the little flag. Yeah.
All right. So
this has been amazing. Thank you, Corey.
Oh yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm gonna shut down the stream, but stay on. I want to talk to you about some other things.
Sounds good.
And